It was announced, or reported, I guess I should say, last night from the Oxford side of things and from the Baton Rouge side of things that LSU had made a new hire, added a new staffer to its recruiting operation, and he comes from Ole Miss. Kelvin Bolden, who has been the coordinator of recruiting strategy in Oxford for the last 3 years, is headed to Baton Rouge. Now, this is an era unlike any we've ever traversed here in the college sports landscape, and especially in the college football landscape, where you're talking about far larger rosters than baseball or basketball or women's basketball or softball. And you're talking about a lot of money, more money than is being doled out for women's basketball, men's basketball, baseball, softball. These recruiting operations are massive, and they don't look like they did 15 years ago, where you had a position coach who was also your recruiting coordinator, and your head coach was kind of the closer, and everybody had their little area, and you went and tried to get as much high-end high school talent as you possibly could and develop a roster year over year, run a program. Now, you certainly got to manage talent, but it's going out as fast as it's coming in, and you've got to handle the financial aspect of it, making sure that the players are satisfied with their compensation or they'll leave. It looks far more like the NFL than it does college football. And therefore, the administration and the composition of the football department looks different than it did 10 years ago. It's not just a head coach, some positional coaches, a couple coordinators, and some analysts. You've got to have evaluation, not just the high school evaluation. You got to evaluate the entire country. It goes in the transfer portal. And you've got to manage that roster to understand if we lose this guy and this guy and this guy, how are we going to fill it with this guy and this guy and this guy? And the person that's been in charge of all of this for the last couple of years in Baton Rouge is Austin Thomas. Brian Kelly thinks Austin Thomas is awesome. Scott Woodward thinks Austin Thomas is awesome. The consensus around college football is that Austin Thomas is awesome. And he's been given a big influence in that building as to how that football program is going to operate. Where did Austin Thomas come from this time? Ole Miss. Who did he work with? Kelvin Bolden. It sounds like, based on Joe Sloan's tweet that had Austin Thomas in it, and what we're hearing from the Ole Miss side of things, is that this is a name and a hire that Austin Thomas was very much in favor of. I probably can go as far as to say spearheaded. He wants this guy in this role at LSU to help him put together the best roster year after year after year that LSU possibly can. So LSU made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Kelvin Bolden is going to become LSU's assistant general manager, not a position that's ever been held at LSU. It's a newly created position. He'll get a nice pay bump. It probably helps LSU to an extent that his children are high school aged and are in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, which is closer to Baton Rouge than it is to Oxford. Oxford way up in the northern part of the state. Ocean Springs down south. And this is the move that he thinks is his best in terms of furthering his career. And LSU appears to be the beneficiary of that. Now, look, I can't look at Kelvin Bolden's body of work and adequately assess it. Like, there's no way for me to do that. If you hire an offensive coordinator that's been an offensive coordinator for 5 years and his offenses score 48 points per game, that's pretty good. If you hire an offensive coordinator who's been coordinating offenses for 5 years and he scores 9 points per game, that's not very good. If you hire a head coach whose lifetime winning percentage is 81%, that's really good. If it's 31%, it's not very good. There are numbers that I can sit here as a talking head and analyze when you make hires. I can't really do that with Kelvin Bolden in this instance because he's an off-field coach who is helping with recruiting. I don't know which of Ole Miss's top 20 classes he was the most involved in. I don't know what he does when he's in front of these student athletes on an official visit or an in-home visit. I don't know what makes him better as far as cultivating relationships with this player or with this guardian or like that's how am I supposed to? I don't know that. But what I can do is I can look at what the Ole Miss fan base and really football program thinks of him. Well, how do I do that? Well, Chase Parham, who is now with 24/7 Sports, who does an awesome job covering Ole Miss, broke this story from the Ole Miss side. He sent out a tweet yesterday at 7:15 p.m. that said the Ole Miss Director of Recruiting Strategy, Kelvin Bolden, is in talks to head to LSU in an elevated off-the-field role. Dropped a post and more on his message board, hearing it's likely already done. Here is the response to Chase's tweet from the Ole Miss fans. No, this is not ideal. No, come on, Ole Miss. Damn. No, 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 no. He was incredible. No, mistake not matching the offer. Well then, LSU putting Kiffin back in a locker. Imagine that. Very bad news. Awful news. KB is the man. Hate to see. I keep going. But this is the reaction from the Ole Miss side. It appears that those who have followed Ole Miss and have enjoyed the fact that Ole Miss has won 21 games in the last 2 years think he had a large hand in that. And it appears Austin Thomas feels that way too. And it appears Brian Kelly feels that way too. So that, on its face, looks awesome. Now, Ole Miss and LSU are not exactly the same when it comes to recruiting, but they've gotten closer in the last 2 years. Because for my entire life of following roster management in college football, LSU has recruited at the 4 and 5 star level, top 7, top 5 in the country perennially. Ole Miss has recruited 3 and 4 stars, tried to hold on for dear life in the state of Mississippi, ranked usually between 20 and 30, and that's where they've been in high school recruiting. Well, Lane Kiffin takes over and says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're still probably not going to out-recruit Nick Saban at Alabama for high school kids. But if we can raise a bunch of money through this Grove Collective, and we can pay kids for 1 year to come here and outbid everybody else who's still trying to do this the old-fashioned way in recruiting high school kids, we may be able to catch up. And they have. Ole Miss, over the last 2 seasons, has been a top 4 SEC football program. It would be impossible to argue outside of that. And that's never been the case in my time watching Ole Miss football. And then Brian Kelly on the other side said, we're going to do this with high school players. We're going to recruit the best of the best from across the country with our national brand, and we're going to develop players, and we're not going to buy players. And then he watched Ole Miss buy players and watched his staff miss out on players because they weren't buying them. And he said, well, we should probably start buying players. And they did this past year. And they've got the number 1 transfer class in the country. So if that's the way you want to do this, and I realize that revenue sharing has been introduced now and things are a little bit different, but football at LSU is going to get a $15 million boon from this with the revenue sharing. So you can swim in the deep water with a lot of teams at $15 million revenue sharing. And Bolden's been in the middle of that for the last 3 years. So that's a long way of saying, like, I think this is a really good hire for LSU. I can't prove it because there's not a track record I can pull up on the internet or reach out and touch on a piece of paper. But the reputation is sterling. The results on the field for Ole Miss, even though he's not coaching them, have been excellent. And the guy that's in charge of running this thing, 1 rung below Brian Kelly and Austin Thomas, is vouching for him because he's worked with him, and everybody in Baton Rouge is okay with rubber stamping that. And so am I. So if this is a deal where it helps LSU and hurts Ole Miss in the process, sign me right on up for that. Because that's a team that you are directly competing with right now. 1, on the field the last 2 years, and 2, for a spot in the college football playoff. Both of these teams had similar seasons last year. I would argue that Ole Miss did so with a more talented roster, but LSU beat them down here because they made some plays when they absolutely had to late in that game. But this looks to be very, very good news for LSU. If you missed it last night, missed it today, just hop into the car. Kelvin Bolden, a former Southern Miss wide receiver who's gotten into the administrative side of college football and has been doing a great job off the field for Ole Miss, is coming in a similar role at LSU. It's a promotion in terms of title and in money. He'll be the assistant general manager to Austin Thomas and those two guys will spearhead LSU's roster building moving forward. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.